This is James Lupton, and I am delighted to be joined again with Paul Zanon. Paul, how are you, mate?
I am delighted to be on your show, mate. I'm actually, and for everyone listening, I just want to say how proud I am of you how you're smashing the crap out of podcasts at the moment. You've got the biggest names on there, the best questions coming from the best angles, and yeah, doing great, mate. So I am absolutely honoured to be on it tonight.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you for those words. Today, something a little bit different to what we normally do. We're going to look at some of the best rematches to make in boxing today. We've picked three out each because we could be here all day otherwise. There's quite a few that we could come in with, but we've picked out three. So we'll start off with one of my first ones here, and that is because one of these guys has recently fought, and that is Jack Catterall. Jack Catterall and Josh Taylor. The scorecards, in many opinion, was very controversial. A lot of people feel, especially Jack Catterall and his team, they feel they should be undefeated still. They feel they should be undisputed. And he'll be very, very much aggrieved that he's got a blip on his record. Although I have spoken to Jack about this, and he seems to be over it. He's put it to bed, and he feels that it's more a case of Josh Taylor's got to deal with the demons of this because he knows what really happened. However, it is Jack who's not a world champion. It is Jack who's got, no longer got his O, which he should have, that he feels. First of all, do you feel that's a rematch that is worthy of us seeing again?
100%, yeah. And the fact that Jack hasn't had his rematch says something about his opponent, doesn't it? I mean, Josh could have taken that fight a long time ago. Did he take the Teofimo Lopez fight because it was more money stateside? Probably. That backfired, didn't it? So the fighters fight to get that bargaining chip, that world title, and now he's got to try and work out how to sort of get back there again. Jack Catterall is just one of the nicest people. Forget boxing, just as a person, as you well know yourself, you've spoken to many times. A lovely, lovely person. Really, really is. And everyone was gutted, including myself, when the result was read out that night. And he is owed that rematch sooner rather than later. But either way, I would like to see him in some massive fights. I'd like to see Jack get a couple of big defining cash paydays, whether it be against Regis Prograis, whoever it may be against. Because I remember from years back, Nigel Travis telling me he is such an awkward fighter for opponents, and he's so talented, and he's got some great sneaky little lean backs, and he works from awkward angles. And it's so true. He might not be the prettiest fighter at times, but my goodness, he's got some real genius in there. So I would love to see that as a rematch, 100%.
You know the team very well with Jamie Moore and Nigel Travis. Obviously, you wrote Jamie's autobiography. How would they have been feeling after what they feel was a robbery?
Nigel's usually quite good at sort of, and we all know Nigel. He's not one for being quiet, and he's not one for not talking a lot. But he's very disciplined usually when it comes to being outspoken in front of a camera. And that's probably the first time I've really seen him absolutely lose his shit in front of the camera after that. And I think he was basically just expressing the how everyone else felt. To be honest, everyone that was watching the fight, everyone that was in the arena, everyone that was booing in there. Jamie did very well to sort of, bite his tongue, his lip, and everything else. But obviously, he was fuming as well. Was it a robbery? I hate using that it's a robbery within boxing, but I would have to say that's as close to robbery as you possibly could have got. I think the team done well to keep their shit together to an extent, but I'm sure that they were like volcanic hot when they walked out of there, and it would have taken a long time to cool down. Poor Jack, unfortunately, should have had his bargaining chips to be going on to those massive fights. He should have been fighting Lopez. He should have been picking who's next. The Regis Prograis fight might have already happened. Who knows? But let's hope that Jack gets his what he deserves. He gets those big fights, gets those big paydays, and more importantly, goes down in history books as a world champion.
On the flip side, to look at the other side of it with Josh Taylor, like as you mentioned, he took the Teofimo Lopez fight out in America, probably for a bigger payday, which you can't blame anybody in business. Now, he took that loss. In a lot of people's eyes, he's got now back-to-back losses. Does Josh Taylor arguably need this fight more than ever? And does he need it more than Jack Catterall now?
So I think it's two things there. Firstly, coming back to what you just said a second ago about money, if he gets offered the big fight, the next big fight, who knows? Errol Spence decided he wants to fight him at 154 and he just fancies it, or or 147, whatever the weight may be. then he's going to go for that 100%. You know, he's in it for the business, and you know, Josh has been in some tough fights. He's had some big old cuts on his face, and I think pride-wise, he'd probably want to fight Jack. But there's probably a little bit something at the back of his head saying, if I do lose that, then it'll prove for everyone, you know, that they were right in the first place. I did lose it in the first place, and I've also just come off a loss. So I think if Josh's management team, I've got a little bit of sense. What they do is they get him back in the ring against someone who's rated top 10 in the world, and someone that he can look very good against, probably stop, and then that gets his stock back up again. You know, he needs that as well mentally to let himself know that he's still got a lot to offer. But the Lopez fight, to be honest, kind of did show his limitations a little bit as well, which made you think, has he been exposed to that level yet? The answer is probably not. You know, when he beat sort of Postol, a very good fighter back in the day, but he was fighting certainly a bit of a shell version of him. You know, so I think Josh Taylor has still got a lot to offer, but I don't think he's got more than about 2 or 3 big fights left in him.
No, absolutely, but it's certainly a rematch that I'd love to see, and a lot of fans want to see the wrong put right. Paul, what was your first rematch you'd like to see?
Right, the first one I'd like to see is Chris Billiam-Smith against Richard Riakporhe. So interesting one that, because when they first fought, you have to remember that Richard Riakporhe actually turned professional before Chris Billiam-Smith. He turned professional in 2016, almost a whole year before Billiam-Smith did. And when he lost against Richard Riakporhe, it was for the WBA Intercontinental Cruiserweight title. And then so he loses that split decision, close, which is another reason why I'd like to sort of you know, see the rematch. Then in Chris's next fight, wins a Commonwealth title, defends that, and then goes on to win against Tommy McCarthy, the British Commonwealth European. Again, great fight, you know, split decision. That's almost a rematch one itself. But then comes back against Tommy McCarthy. I was going to say a rematch, a rubber match, sorry, because he beats Tommy McCarthy again, but stops him in 8. And that kind of shows how quickly Chris was working through his own sort of gears. Beats Isaac Chamberlain, and then beats Lawrence Okolie, which a lot of people thought he was going to get absolutely smoked out there by the bigger guy. So he's got all the belts. He's had the British, the Commonwealth, the European, the world. And you've got Richard, who hasn't really fought anybody since fighting Chris, to be honest. If you look at the names he's fought against, I mean, Dion Juma was probably one of the better names in there, but Fabio Turki, and he's fighting Dylan Bregion this Saturday, in fact. And Dylan's record is 13 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw. Why is he fighting these people? What happens to Richard Riakporhe? Because for me, I said years ago, this guy could smash out Lawrence Okolie, probably stop him. I'm talking 5-6 years ago. Why that fight didn't happen, I don't know. So I'd like to see him in with Chris Billiam-Smith, because I think that he'd rise to the occasion. He put in a really decent training camp. He hits hard. He's got more to offer than Okolie. And we're now seeing the very best of Chris Billiam-Smith. He's a very, very tough man to beat at cruiserweight. And he's got all those big money fights, which he thoroughly deserves, on the horizon. But Richard Riakporhe could be a banana skin for absolutely any of the top 5 cruiserweights in the world. So that's my first one I would love to see.
You mentioned the Riakporhe turned over before Billiam-Smith, and the expectation from everybody really was that Riakporhe was the next big thing at cruiserweight. He was going to be, like you say, world champion. He's going to blast for everybody. He was stopping people left, right, centre. It was exciting. Chris Billiam-Smith, on the other hand, he's not somebody who had ever really impressed me up until after he lost to Riakporhe. And since then, the improvements that Billiam-Smith has made and the run that he's on, like you say, collecting titles, picking up almost every title possible on the way, and now to be the world champion, it's not somebody who everyone thought back in the day at the time when everyone said Riakporhe will be world champion. Nobody said Billiam-Smith will be world champion. Does that pay testament to Chris Billiam-Smith and his mentality and how he's put the work in?
Yeah, I remember chatting with Barry McGuigan. I think it was at the Boxing Rights Club. It would have been around 2016, 17. I think it was the end of 2016. He said, this lad's going to turn professional soon. And I just remember seeing this this lump of a guy. And I said, what, cruiser or heavy? He said, cruiser. And I just remember thinking, what a lovely, lovely kid. I mean, just so polite. And, he remembers your name whenever you're at a press conference or when you speak to him. And the fact that he's got the moniker of the gentleman is absolutely perfect. But you're right. I didn't see anything too special in his opening fights. I could see he was banging, but that was more a case of that he was being fed, as the Americans say, tomato cans, So, first round knockouts, he had 3 first round knockouts in his first 4 fights. But then after the Riyad Paul fight, and he was fighting for titles, he was fighting against good guys. I mean, Tom McCarthy, I think, is a very good fighter, So, and Isaac Chamberlain, well, we saw him recently against Mikel Lawal, very good fighter. And Isaac Chamberlain took a terrible beating there. He had hospital afterwards, and and it was a lovely touch with the typical Chris Williams-Smith. Isaac Chamberlain wins that fight, wins a British title, and one of the first people in the changing room afterwards was Chris Williams-Smith to congratulate him and give him a bit of advice. And absolutely lovely, absolutely lovely. The domestic cruisers at the moment, Lawrence Okoli again. Lawrence Okoli, Richard Riyad Paul, would that be a nice fight before the Williams-Smith one? Yeah, very possibly. But I would just like to see Riyad Paul, Williams-Smith lock horns sooner rather than later, because they're moving into their 30s now. I think they're both about 33, 34 years old. And the last thing we want to see is this becomes like a one that was a little bit too late. Chris has had 19 fights, and he's still very, very fresh, without a doubt. But again, with age and everything, you got to say that he's probably got a couple of years tops before he starts to slow down, or he starts to have some of those, very tough fights. Because he's done a lot of fights which have gone the distance, and with tough people. The McCarthy fight, the Isaac Chamberlain fight, the Okoli fight. You start doing 36 rounds in 3 fights, and it takes a shitload out of the engine. If we're able to bang people out in 1 or 2 rounds, fantastic. But in the real world, that doesn't happen very often at that level.
I want to mention 2 points on Ben Smith before we move on to the next fight. And that is, firstly, you mentioned the Tommy McCarthy fights and the Isaac Chamberlain fight. For me, I don't know about the bookies. For me, I had him as the underdog going into those fights. I did not think he would come out victorious in those fights, personally, which again just goes to show how well he has done in terms of, proving people wrong, I suppose, really. But also, you mentioned there about the fact he's now world champion, the gentleman, and he is such a nice guy. We do see that a lot in boxing, but for somebody who, like I say, has come through as the underdog, I suppose, all his career, like I say, never expected to get there. He's now seemingly a massive ticket seller. Obviously, in Bournemouth, boxers seem to have a star on their hands because he is selling out in his hometown very, very easily within hours of tickets going on sale. And that's a massive thing in boxing.
Absolutely, yeah. Chris Williams-Smith is almost like the antichrist of promotion. He does exactly the opposite of what a promoter would like. They'll be like, trash talk. I'm not trash talking. Act like an arsehole. That's not me. Dress a bit rascal. I dress in suits. It's all like that. He is literally being chipped off Rocky Marciano, as in he is the absolute gentleman. Will do everything from going over and sort of cleaning the person's shoes before actually the bell goes, and then when the bell goes, animal mode comes on. Because when Chris Williams-Smith's got someone hurt, he is relentless and he is merciless. He absolutely pounds in, and he's a heavy-handed fighter. But he's got that lovely throwback about him as a personality, and I think that's what makes him that much more endearing. And that's why I genuinely believe once he's finished in boxing as a fighter, I think he'll make a great trainer. I think he'll be a great pundit because he's very knowledgeable. He speaks well, and I think he'll have a lot to offer society as well. Trust me, mark my words. At some point, it'll be Chris Williams-Smith, MBE, because he's going to make big strides in society. He's going to do stuff for people at grassroots level. It's like Luke Campbell recently when he started hooking up with mental health charities. That was absolutely beautiful. So he said, I'm making a big announcement soon. And I thought, oh God, here we go. What is it? He's not joined up with what's his name? Doing CBD oil now or something, is he? So, but it wasn't any of that. It was to announce that he wanted to help people with mental health, and got these walks. He gets people out, and I thought absolutely superb. Chris Williams-Smith's going to be like that, 100%, and he will be a pillar of society, and a person that people will go and speak to. And for that alone, you can only love the man. You really can. You know, we need more of the Chris Billiam Smiths in the world. I don't need to see people dressed up in rascal clothing, bad mouthing. You know, it's like at the end of the day, you still got to go in there and fight. So behave yourself.
No, absolutely. On to my second rematch I'd like to see. Katie Taylor against Amanda Serrano. Obviously, we know Katie's got a big rematch coming up already in Chantel Cameron. First question, just off the back of that, even if she loses to Chantel Cameron again for a second time, is the Serrano fight still there? And is it still as big as it is without the Chantel Cameron losses, let's say?
Again, that probably come down to promotions, you know, because all they'll do is they'll rerun back the first fight to everyone who's watching. And that first fight was brutal. I mean, in that fight, Katie was hurt like she'd never been hurt before. And Serrano's engine is something else. You know, I'd like to see Serrano against Cameron at some point. I think that'd be good, albeit I think Chantel's too big for her. I think, you know, Serrano's a natural 126, and she was saying that after the Taylor fight, saying, you know, you've got a 126 fighter here against a 135 fighter. But it was a brutal fight. You know, 7-weight world champion in Amanda Serrano, and all her MMA world honors as well. You know, she's mentally and physically one really tough cookie. I think that would make a great rematch, but it also depends on what state Katie comes out of this fight, because I hate to say it, but it almost sounds like she's been getting a little bit slurry in the last few fights when you hear her talking. Really don't hope she's not, you know, had any issues that's caused that, i.e., being pounded in the head. But I'd hate to see her retire from boxing and be on a bit of a slide, a rapid slide, you know. I'd like to see her retire from boxing with a good sum of money in the bank, and she can drift off into the sunset. And I think she would literally drift off into the sunset. She's not someone that wants to be involved in punditry. She doesn't want to train other people. What she's contributed to the world of boxing between amateur and world level is purely pioneering. Absolutely amazing. I just want to make sure that, you know, she can get out, not unscarred, but unnecessarily scarred too much mentally and physically. So, but as a rematch, yeah, I think it could be a corker, absolute corker. And even if she does lose against Cameron, it'd be more a case that, okay, well, she's going to be fighting someone here who's naturally smaller, and as opposed to Chantel. And yeah, see what happens. I think if I have to call it now, I say Chantel wins again, probably more convincingly than before. Very, very clever fighter, Chantel Cameron. And I said before the fight, I think we might have even talked about it on one of your podcasts, where I'd said that Chantel will win the fight. It'll be a hard grind, but she'll be in control. She'll dictate pace, and she will show the power as and when she wants to. And I think this time she'll probably show it that little bit more.
In terms of the Serrano Katie Taylor first fight, for me personally, it's one of the best fights I've seen. I remember interviewing Christy Martin not long after, and she said it's the best female fight ever. As simple as that. And she was involved in a few of them herself, you know. In terms of that whole barrier of female boxing and boxing, when's that barrier going to get broken? Could this rematch break that barrier where we say, well, no, it's one of the best fights I've ever seen in boxing, not just in female fighting?
I think we're getting there, and I hate to say it because I think the guy's a total dick, arsehole, whatever. I mean, I could start to use all sorts of words to describe him, but I've got to take my hat off to him, and everyone knows I do wear a hat. And it's Jake Paul, because he started managing Amanda Serrano, and he said, "I'll get you $1 million for the fight." Now, this is a 7-weight world champion who had been fighting for scraps, and by the time that tax had been taken away and management and this and that and the other, she was ending up with a handful of dollars. And he was like, "I'll get you $1 million for that fight." And he did it. He absolutely did it. And he went public to say fighters are getting beaten up and they're not getting money they deserve. He was talking about men and women, but he was more pushing on the women's side of things. So it's absolutely disgusting. And fair play. Yeah, I think he actually said to Amanda, "I'll get you the $1 million and I'll get you to headline at Madison Square Gardens." If anyone had said that, if someone said to me 5 years ago, "You've got this dickhead of a YouTuber with his bright blonde barnet and his massive mouth and just does not shut up, that he's going to get involved in boxing, he's going to start doing all these exhibition fights." I said, "Well, that annoys me." And then they said he's going to get women's boxing $1 million fight. against Katie Taylor, I'd have gone, good on him. I'd want to know logistics, but I'd say good on him because it's long overdue. Women are taking punches. They're going through gruesome training camps. They have to make weight. They've got all the challenges of, sort of deciding, I'm suffering financially here. Can I actually do this? Do I need to borrow more money? What about sponsors? What about selling tickets? They got to go through all of that shit as well. So I think we're turning a bit of a corner. I hope they turn a big corner soon. That kind of like with the football, women's football. I remember about 10 years ago, someone saying to me, it was a discussion with a lady, and she was saying, what do you think about women's football? I said, at the moment, it's substandard. And she didn't let me kind of take my breath to bring in the next sentence. So she absolutely went for my throat and go, oh, man, and all sorts of stuff. And what I was trying to say was, it's substandard. But if they get the same support as the men, they get the same financial backbone as the men, if they get the correct training, all the gear, all the sponsors, all the nutritional supplements, all the scientific advice, they can be as good as the men, and if not, even bigger entertainers and bigger crowd pullers. And I think they proved their point when they won the Euros, and and they're getting better and better and better. I love watching the women's football now, as much as the men's, 100%, without a doubt. But 10 years ago, no, it wasn't great to look at. It looked like sort of Sunday league. And with boxing, women's boxing has got so much better. Again, the investment in there. If you've got a male fighter who's being paid $5 million, and you've got a woman who's being paid $50,000 for both world title fights, and one's not getting all the nutritional advice, the correct support, the big team around, she's going to struggle. She's going to have to do the best she can with the resources she has, with the amount of time and finance available to her. If you've got 20 times that, of course, everyone's going to do better. So coming back to Chantel and Katie, for example, I hope they make a shitload of cash from this. I hope that they raise the bar so that other women who are fighting at the next level, for example, you've got Natasha Jonas against Michaela Meyer soon. Both of them been pushing the crap out of women's boxing. Natasha Jonas, for me, simply one of the nicest people in boxing, and no one was happier than me to see her starting to win world titles in her late 30s. I remember interviewing her about 7 years ago at Sky Sports and listening to her journey to date and thinking, she'd lost that fight where she got battered, basically. It was proper Cinderella woman stuff, She'd come back, and she not only came back, I actually had her winning the Katie Taylor fight as well. She didn't get it, and now she's got titles, and she's been moving through the gears, multi-weight world champ. So she fights against Michaela Meyer, good fight. Let's see what happens there. As you've got Sky Nicholson now fighting against Lucy Wildheart, again, another great fight. Two supreme athletes. What's going to happen there? So as the right publicity is happening at the right time now. They're getting good trainers behind them. Before it was almost sort of token boxing trainers. They're getting good boxing trainers behind them now. And like I said, they're raising the bar far faster than men's because they've still got a little way to catch up there overall, the big picture. But my goodness, are they making a blaze of flames behind them. And I'm loving the experience of being part of that slipstream.
Absolutely, I agree with you there, Paul. Tell us your second rematch you'd like to see.
Right. Okay. So my second one is the Lee Wood and Michael Conlan one. Fight of the year last year. What a barn burner! You got Lee Wood, who was knocked down in probably the last microsecond of the first round, straight left, and he buzzed him. He absolutely buzzed him. And if it wasn't for the bell, would the fight have perhaps come to a premature end there? Very possibly. If he'd have landed that punch after 1 minute, I'm not sure if Lee Wood, because he still looked scrambled, he was kind of like, sort of brought over to his corner at the end of the bell, could have gone another way. And then the round starts sort of reading out, Conlan's in charge, and then gets to sort of rounds 9 or 10, and Lee Wood starts to pick it up. And then Conlan's sort of fighting back. Then he gets knocked down in the 11th round. And so at that point, you can kind of see that he's really running on empty, gets stopped in the 12th. That's a fight I would love to see again. Lee Wood has started to get reputation as the comeback king when he fought against Josh Warrington recently. It's certainly behind in the cards. He finished it off in devastating style. And, they're talking about the rematch of him and Josh Warrington. Fantastic. I'd like to see the Conlan one again. It was fast-paced. Lee Wood, again, he's got that throwback style against him. A lovely, lovely kid. Absolutely lovely. So, yeah, that's the one I would like to see. Out of the 3 fights, that's the one I'd like to see the most.
In terms of Mick Conlan, he's recently changed his training team, got a new coach on board. Now, sometimes that's not always beneficial to the fighter. Just talk to me about how that can go one way or the other when you do change camps, and especially from something that you've always known for such a long time with your previous camp.
Yeah, it's a tough one because so you get people like Eubank Jr., who's gone through 75 million different trainers, and I don't really know why he has trainers because he does what he wants to do anyway, and that's it. It kind of reminds me of Johnny Tapia. I remember when I was interviewing Teresa, who you know well, and you've interviewed her many times. And I remember sort of saying, "Is it true that Johnny had like 19 trainers?" And she went, "Oh no, that's not true." I said, "Oh, sorry, I thought, just heard his rumor." She said it was nearer 30, and I was like, "What?" So, and she was saying 1 week in particular, he actually got rid of 3 trainers in 1 week. And we're not talking Mickey Mouse trainers here. It was the likes of Eddie Futch, Freddie Roach, that sort of caliber of trainer. Um, if you're like those guys, it doesn't really matter about the trainer. But if you're someone like a Joe Calzaghe, his dad was training him, and forget about the bond of father and son there. It was the trainer relationship. And there was one fight where he didn't have his dad in the corner, and you could see he was making all the moves. The trainer was trying to tell him box more traditionally, that whereas dad used to say, constantly say, "Fucking, you need to go for him. You need to put it on him. Do this, that." Knew how to bring out the best in him. Freddie Roach, Angelo Dundee, this sort of guy. Angelo Dundee was great. When you listen to when he was in the corner with someone like Sugar Ray Leonard, and he goes, "You need to knock this fucking guy's ass out." That's literally the sort of things he would say. Not many trainers would do that. You got someone like Virgil Hunter would be standing from the other side of the ropes, calmly talking to Andre Ward. That worked for Andre. Enzo Calzaghe wouldn't have worked for Andre. So in terms of Mick Conlon, my theory on trainers and fighters changing the trainers consistently is that it's very, very, very rarely anything to do with the trainer, to do with the fighter, and maybe sometimes the entourage around them, sort of whispering in their ear, saying, "Maybe change trainers. Now's the time." Well, I think it's a bad thing because it's like culture. It's like moving to a different country. It's going to take you a while to get used to that person, and then by the time you do, it might be too late in terms of should I have maybe just stayed with the trainer I was originally? Maybe I was a bit quick. Maybe I didn't speak it through enough with the other trainer. Maybe I didn't express myself enough. I don't know. Other times it has worked where a person has changed camps, and as we've seen, a lot of fighters went over to Jamie Moore, and Jamie brought a lot of them up to world title level, if not world champions. And with Rocky Fielding, I'm not sure. I loved Oliver Harrison. He was a lovely, lovely guy, but I'm not sure he could have done what Jamie Moore did that night when Rocky Fielding won the world title. I remember Jamie Moore telling me that they get to Germany and they get into the room and he turns up the heating to 35 degrees in the room. He said basically everyone was pretty much walking around in underpants. It was roasting. But he wanted them to feel what it was going to be like in that arena because he knew it was going to be baking hot. And they were trying to use that against him. And, Jamie worked at everything meticulously. Not sure if Oliver would have gone to that sort of level. Oliver would have made sure that Rocky came in at the best shape he could have and his strategy would have been great. But sometimes a change can be good. On the whole, I would say 95% of the time, it doesn't work out.
Talk of the gamble there with Mick Conlan changing camps and changing trainers. What about the gamble for Lee Wood when you rely heavily on being the comeback king, when you rely on your punch, when you fall behind on the cards and you think, well, it's okay, I've still got that one punch that'll put him to sleep. How much of a gamble is that to go through a fight through to rounds 10, 11, 12, those championship rounds, still relying on that one punch, knowing you're behind on the cards?
I don't think he goes into it thinking I'll cruise the rounds or I'll sort of let the other person sort of knack themselves out and I'll catch him with a big punch. I think it's just the way it's panned out. I think that he's quite an easy target to hit, Lee Wood, and but he's quite clever as well because he does a lot of sliding. And if you see him, he sort of like he lifts his lead foot to sort of show that he's actually going to make a movement. And sometimes he's setting a little trap. He's very, very clever. Um, Parallel examples of fighters which had that sort of a winning punch late on. You got Carl Froch when he was fighting Jermaine Taylor, literally in the last round, the last minute, and he comes out one big punch and bang. Rocky Marciano and when he was fighting Jersey Joe Walcott for the world title, when he threw the infamous punch which knocked him out for about sort of 2 minutes solid. They didn't plan that. It's just they had that in their armament, and the fact that you can let that punch loose and finish a fight with it is great to know. So I think it helps, that it gives a person confidence knowing they've got that in there. Say, for example, you take a Eubank Jr. He doesn't have one punch power. He's very rarely finished off fighters in one punch. What he does do is he hits you consistently, and it does not let you off the hook. He's a suffocating fighter and a very dangerous one when he's on his rolls. But with Lee Wood, I generally don't think he plans to do that. He just basically goes out there, and due to the fact he's easy to hit, fighters tend to knacker themselves out trying to knock him out because they're thinking, I'm having some success here, as Michael Conlon did. But it must be very disheartening for Conlon, knock him down in the first round, get close on a few other occasions. Then he bloody knocks you down in round 11 and wobbles you a few times before, and then finishes you off in the final round. For anyone trying to look at the blueprint of Lee Wood, good luck with that. It's kind of been shredded and put back together many times. It's not an easy one to look at, which is why it makes him such an entertaining fighter. And also, so late in his career, already got a few losses on his record on there. But like we mentioned before about Chris Billiam-Smith, since he's won the world title, since he's been picking up the silverware, he's become a different fighter.
No, absolutely. We'll move on to my third and final pick. A bit of a controversial one because the original fight was so one-sided. Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. For me personally, it's a fight I'd like to see again purely because of, one, the mastery we saw in Terence Crawford. It's, in my opinion, cemented him as the number one pound-for-pound king in boxing today. And he made it look easy. Now, the reason I'd like to see a rematch is because did we see the best Errol Spence on that night? Because we know how good he can be. And that night, something just wasn't right. Something didn't click for him. He didn't seem to be the Errol Spence that we all know and love as boxing fans. And that's why I'd like to see a rematch in that one myself personally, because I'd like to give him a second chance to come in and be the best that he can be. Because on that night, or the first fight, he definitely was not the best that he could be.
Yeah, now, I think it's no secret that Errol does put on a bit of weight when he's not training. There was a picture of him the other day. He looks like he could jump in with Chris Billiam-Smith at cruiser at the moment. He's enjoying life. He's enjoying the paydays there. I think there's two Errol Spences here. There's the one pre-car crash, and which for me was the very best. I remember being on Talksport with Gareth A. Davis. You never forget the A. Gareth A. Davies, and I had to do the shout of who's going to win between Kell Brook and Errol Spence. And I actually shouted out Errol Spence, and I actually predicted the round who was going to win. I think it was the 11th or something. And I knew he was a devastating puncher, but he's also a very systematic puncher and very accurate and doesn't lose a lot of energy. And I called it wrong when he fought against Mikey Garcia. I thought Mikey was going to put up a much more competitive fight, but he suffocated him. He cut the ring down. He did everything perfect. But I've been saying for years that if he fought against Bud, that he was going to lose. And I just thought he's got too much for him. His speed, his relentless attacks from all angles, and the way he's been working through the gears on weight divisions as well. For me, it's kind of cemented my confidence in the fact that I thought that Terence was going to win. So I personally wouldn't like to see the fight again because I think it'll be the same. I think it'll be stoppage again, and I think that that could be quite damaging mentally for Errol Spence Jr. I think there's other big fights out there. I agree that I think Terence is the best pound-for-pound fighter on the planet. And does he need to step back in there and fight the best pound-for-pound fighter on the planet again? No, he can still make great money fighting fighters who top 10. There's still world titles for him to pick up without a doubt. Maybe at 154, I don't know. I mean, how would he do against Charlo? Who knows? I think there's some great fights out there for Errol Spence. I just don't think he needs to go in with Crawford again. It's just the wrong fight for me. It's all wrong for him.
Would he not look back when he retired with potential regret if he did that and avoided the rematch with Crawford?
I mean, they were talking afterwards about, that if they did a rematch, it'd be at 154. And, the whole thing, keyword there being if, it didn't sound desperate to want to do it. Once he retires, will he regret it? No, I think he'll be sitting there counting his dollars out, sort of saying which version of Ferrari should I buy next. One maybe which has got better roll bars in it that's not going to kill me. Albeit, if memory serves me, I think he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and when the car crashed and he went flying out of it, not wearing a seatbelt actually saved his life, which is crazy. I think it kind of threw him out the car or something like that, and then the car pancaked after that. But either way, I mean, it was horrific to hear what happened to him. So delighted he's managed to come through it. So delighted that he's managed to get back in the ring. But yeah, I don't think he'll look over his shoulder. I think in years to come, him and Bud will probably become mates. And Errol Spence is one of those guys that, again, I can kind of see him owning a ranch in Texas somewhere, and with his big 10-gallon hat on, riding on the back of his horse, and just enjoying life. I don't think he's someone who wants to immerse themselves in punditry or anything like that. He's not like a Sean Porter, that's for sure. But yeah, I think there's a few more fights that Errol can still do. Just steer clear of Bud.
And moving on very quickly to your last pick, we've got about 5 minutes left on this record. So, Paul, what is your third and final pick for rematches?
Mine's a bit of a blast in the past. So Chris Eubank Jr. against Billy Joe Saunders, as long as Billy Joe can cook down from whatever weight he's currently carrying around. He had the fight against Canelo. He lost. He had his orbital bone fractured, but he was him in an all-time great. Kind of talking like Errol Spencer with Bud. It's not someone he ever needs to go in the ring against again. But Eubank Jr., Billy Joe, it's all about one thing for them, primarily money. If there's a massive bucket of money there for the both of them, they'll work out weight divisions, they'll work out catch weights if need be, and that's it. And if the both of them come in good condition, we know they're going to cook up the best press conferences. The beef will be endless, and that's a fight I would love to see, because the first one was that close, and Billy Joe in that fight wasn't in the best of conditions, because he won the first half and then lost the second, and that was a very junior Chris Eubank Jr. He didn't have the amateur pedigree that Billy Joe did, and he gave a very good account of himself, and his whole life has always kept himself in phenomenal shape. So I'd just like to see if the two could agree on terms, what would happen on the rematch.
We mentioned about Billy Smith earlier being, not a trash talker, not somebody who's going to come in and be a bit of a maverick in a press conference. These two are all about that life. Just a final point on this rematch, that rivalry. How much does a rivalry and a story sell a fight?
Hugely. I remember with Jimmy Tibbs when Mark Kaler fought against Errol Christie. It turned into West Ham versus the world sort of thing, and that the police were there, worried that it was going to turn into a huge riot, and thankfully it didn't. I think Cass Pennant actually was helping out with security that night, and had a word with some of the West Ham guys. But yeah, rivalries are gigantic, and especially when it comes to rematches and ones that finish off in split decisions or majority decisions. It's you then wonder, right, anything's possible here. It really is. So yeah, I love a rivalry. I can digest a bit of trash talk and even the odd flying table in a press conference, but I verge more on enjoying the Chris Billiam-Smith style of pre-fight talk.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, thank you very much for your time. That is 6 of the best rematches that boxing can make today. And hopefully we get to see 1 or 2 of them come to fruition soon.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot for having me on, James.
No problems at all. Thanks for coming on.